Hello again, Hodgepodge Mama here. Uh, I'd like to finally do a video on one of the ways that I think we parent differently, and that's actually the way we started parenting differently, and that's having a home birth. Our daughter just turned 2 last week, and we're thinking about trying for a sibling for her, so it's fresh on my mind thinking about the birth experience. So I thought I would do a video. Probably going to include a lot of details. This may end up being 2 parts, but we'll see. Um, the first of all, when we first got married, I was not trying to have kids, or at least not the old-fashioned way. Either didn't want kids or I wanted to adopt only, kind of going back and forth about that. So the reason mainly was because of the way birth was portrayed in the media. It just looked painful. It looked like the women were just disrespected. They were rushed. It just didn't look like there was any possibility of any redeeming qualities about it. No possibility of having any control over the situation. It's the only way birth was ever portrayed. And so I didn't want any part of it. It didn't look like something that I wanted to experience. And my husband was on board. So it was kind of out of my mind. So when I was in college and my English professor shared with us that she had had, I think 4 out of 5 of her children at home, it sparked my interest as an academic topic. I went ahead and researched and wrote a paper on home birth because it didn't pertain to me. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't come at it being defensive. But thank goodness that I did that research project, because years later, when I was looking at deciding what kind of birth to have, I had all that information already in the back of my mind, and I was able to refresh my mind and go further with that. Another reason, specifically in our situation, we had struggled with severe infertility for many years. So in order to become pregnant, we had to go through invasive medical procedures, and it just, because our daughter couldn't have been conceived just naturally the old-fashioned way, I wanted to try to balance the scales and give her as natural of a birth as possible, both for her sake and for mine. So I feel like that kind of brought us back to an equilibrium of, back in tune with nature kind of thing. So those are some of the reasons that I was interested in home birth. Well, practically, I really didn't see any reason to go into the hospital. Hospitals are for sick people, for injured people. Normal pregnant women are not sick or injured, so unless you're a high risk pregnancy, there's really no need. And of course, as you can expect in a hospital setting, the medical professionals there are trained and prepared to intervene according to the medical needs that they anticipate. So essentially what ends up happening is that every pregnant woman that comes into a hospital is treated as if she is high risk to some degree. So there's certain interventions that are just kind of automatic. That, coupled with kind of hospital policy and trying to accommodate various hospital policies or schedules and things like that, it just didn't sound appealing to me. I didn't I didn't want my birth experience to be like straight off of an assembly line. And as long as there was no medical necessity for it, I didn't want to opt for medical interventions. Of course, if there's a medical necessity, obviously, I was open to it. I mean, for crying out loud, in order to conceive, we went through a lot of medical interventions. So I'm not anti, modern science by any means. But at any rate, so that's kind of the background. For the pregnancy part, I try to spend the pregnancy really further preparing. I feel like I prepared myself emotionally, intellectually for a home birth well in advance of even becoming pregnant. But then during my pregnancy is when I really focused on preparing my body. So the first trimester, I struggled with nausea. Thanks to my mom's great tip, I had my husband make ginger root tea, like from the actual ginger root. No ginger ale, no crackers, none of that stuff helped. But ginger root tea, I was sipping it all day, all night. It was wonderful because it worked with the first cup. Excuse me. And then after the first trimester, starting the second trimester, I began to feel a little more comfortable. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on here. So I started an exercise routine. And outside of being in the military, and actually not even then, but just when I was in basic training, is the only other time in my life where I've really had a regular um, daily intense workout of any kind. So, but I was doing yoga first thing in the morning. I mean, I started doing poses right on the bed. I had this whole prenatal yoga, of course. I had this whole system where I would sit up in bed, do some of the poses on the bed, and then as I'm getting off the bed, I would use those postures, and I would just be on the floor. I would watch a yoga video later on in the day. So a lot of days I actually did yoga twice. And then most days after work, I would also do dancing for cardio. So I did a lot of Latin music. So I was a little bit partial to that because I also wanted to introduce my daughter to music, to dancing, to that rhythm because I really my husband and I both enjoy that music. So so I was doing that, trying to stay in very good shape, eating well. That wasn't something new. That wasn't something a light bulb went off when I became pregnant. Hey, I should eat healthy. People always would comment that I eat healthy, and I didn't really think that that was anything special. I think I eat a lot of junk food. I love chocolate. I eat a lot of chocolate, but I also eat a lot of fruits, a lot of nuts. I don't like a lot of meat, so it's just, I guess I see it as a preference. But at any rate, so so I took good care of myself during the pregnancy, and the second half of the pregnancy, my husband and I took a Hypno Babies childbirth education class. So it was a 6-week class that basically combined the Bradley method with hypnosis. So we learned about not just hypnosis techniques, but we also learned all the things you would learn in a Bradley class. What's going on with your body, how to prepare for birth, different positions, comfort measures, what to expect, kind of things can go in a birth plan, newborn care, breastfeeding. So all of that was included, as well as scripts and practice and affirmations for the hypnosis part itself. So I recommend that particular Hypno Babies program. Do I feel like I was actually hypnotized during labor? No, but then I was talking about my birth experience with someone recently, and they pointed out that perhaps I was, just not in the way that I had envisioned. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So maybe I was. One of the things two things I guess I was concerned about in my pregnancy. One was that the baby wasn't trying to go head down, wasn't trying to get into position. And I didn't want, this was before I knew she would be very little when she was born. I didn't want her to get too big to where she couldn't flip naturally, because part of me being eligible to have a home birth with the midwifery practice that I was with through our insurance was that the baby had to be in the right position. They weren't going to deliver a breech at home. So I was concerned about that because I didn't want the position of the baby to force me into the hospital. And so I started doing pelvic tilts and different exercises. And at one point I actually felt her flipping inside. And I thought, okay, I'm done. I better stop doing this because then I'll just flip her right back. And sure enough, at the very next checkup, it was confirmed that she had flipped into the right position. So that was exciting. Another thing that I was concerned about, and like I said, I don't want to give too much away, was the umbilical cord being wrapped around her. I'm not sure why. For some reason, that was just always in the back of my mind. But there were like affirmation CDs and different like fear clearing CDs that I would listen to, trying to just put all fears aside, because kind of the reason for all the different interventions in a typical birth in the hospital are fear-based. So in other words, the woman is afraid of pain, afraid of something going wrong, afraid of not knowing what she's doing, afraid of not knowing what to expect, afraid of new sensations in her body for first-time moms, and fear creates tension in the body. So if you're tense, it's hard to release the baby, and you really need to be relaxed in order to open up and let the baby come out. And so if you're tense, it becomes more painful, it becomes more difficult, which seems to kind of reinforce the fear. See, I knew this was going to be difficult, I knew this wasn't going to work, and then it's just like this vicious cycle. I actually never feared birth. I got the opportunity to research it when it wasn't on the horizon for me, and it made perfect sense for me to pursue home birth, to pursue natural childbirth, and I wasn't afraid. I was more afraid of getting pricked with needles unnecessarily and getting procedures done unnecessarily, being disrespected, being kind of shuffled around like I said, like someone on an assembly line at the hospital. That's what I was afraid of. So I was actually trying to avoid that. Um, so fear was not an issue for me. Um, I and I think that really helped. That really helped the whole process go smoothly. So one other thing I wanted to mention about pregnancy, because of our infertility, it's possible that that was our only pregnancy, our only child. So I really wanted to do something to commemorate that, and so I had belly henna done. It ended up being the day before she was born, but it was 2 weeks before she was due, so I figured I had time. So I had that done, and we went, my husband and I went on a spiritual retreat for the weekend also, which I also think helped really with the calming, with the preparation. I think that really helped my daughter feel like, oh, I think everybody's ready. I think it's safe to come out now. And she did. So she ended up coming early. And I wanted to go into the details of how the actual home birth went in part 2. So stay tuned. Thanks.